Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dimensional Dreams podcast on the Dimensional Wellness YouTube channel. My name is DeeDee, and I am so glad to be here with you today, exchanging some energy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm super excited. A little bit of a disclaimer. This podcast is actually not technically new. I have been doing the podcast on Anchor, and so it's already out on, Spotify, because Anchor is now Spotify podcasters. It's a long story short. I don't have the stems for any of the podcasts that I've done since Anchor switched over to Spotify podcast. So in me switching over to YouTube, I have to redo all of the episodes that I've already done. Which is fine because you never hear the same story twice. So if you are following me over from Anchor to YouTube, hello and welcome. There'll be a few podcasts that you will be hearing again. And we're just going to kind of take it from there. So I'm going to explain how... Oh, I'm being so rude. Happy Easter. Today is Easter, so I'm sending you all of the vibes if Easter is something that you celebrate. Today we're actually going to talk about something that is indirectly connected to Easter, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out, but I just trust that I'm putting it out on today, and so in some way it is going to be significant to Easter. But we're not going to talk about anything that specifically talks about Easter today, but it will be about prophecy in the Bible. So I hope that is something that you are interested in. Make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because outside of today, there's going to be a whole schedule on how I post things, especially the podcast will be once a month. I believe on the 29th of each month. So outside of today, it will be posted on a regular schedule, but I'm going to do a different video on the channel explaining all of those things so you know what to expect. But today we're going to go ahead and get started with the breakdown of the podcast, which first we're going to do a tarot message, which I like to do first. And then the second portion, I am going to talk about the dreams in this case. And then the third portion is going to be the analysis, real world connections portion. So in the second portion, I like to just talk about the dreams all the way through so that it's not confusing about what I dreamed about versus what conclusions I have come to. So I'm going to put another little disclaimer right here that a lot of the things that I talk about in the analysis portion, it's some of the stuff might be like quote unquote hard to prove or not what the common knowledge about the topic is. What I am going off of are dreams, visions, and spiritually led information. And so even some of the information when we first hear it, when I first talk about it, might not be exactly what the whole situation is, but I trust that with time, it's going to line up to truth. And I do believe that we get certain information in steps, and then things get added on to it eventually, but us attributing it to one thing versus another thing at a point in time is significant. So I have been on this journey for about 10 strong years now. And so this is my way of sharing what I have come to figure out, as well as the things that I'm currently in transition of figuring out. And I hope that you get as much out of it that I have. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with a tarot message. And we're just going to set the energy today. Just kind of see what energy is in the air. And then we'll go to the second segment. And of course, as the podcast goes on and everything like that, of course, we'll have better sound quality and everything like that. Like I'm doing this podcast in my car right now. Now, if you were listening to the podcast before, you were with me when I was like walking around in the Hilton trying to find places to do the podcast. And then in the hotel, we're living in the hotel trying to find places to do that podcast. And then I actually do finally have a home office, but it is Easter and Sunday. So the family is at home, and it's just a lot easier for me to get it done in the car. Okay, I'm in the car outside my favorite place in the world, Whole Foods. Actually, I had a podcast before that I did, which might still be on the internet somewhere, called Interdimensional. Was it Interdimensional Dreams or something like that? Which I might find that and listen to those podcasts and redo those episodes too. But I was actually doing those podcasts outside of one of the Whole Foods in New Orleans. So Whole Foods and I have a little relationship to each other. Okay. So the first card that we have out here today is the Nine of Wands. And it's very interesting because the Nine of Wands is a card that holds energy about standing up for yourself, standing up for your belief systems, which I know definitely in my life, it's very difficult for someone to come in and kind of dictate a narrative to me, because a lot of what I talk about are personal experiences that I've had. And so kind of the I don't know exactly what to call it. Not necessarily willpower or, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but, you know, like the wanting to go back and forth about certain things. Oh, I could definitely see how that is coming up. We're going to be talking about today with the dream today. We're going to be talking about, some controversial things. And, I'm going to stand on what I talk about today because that's what I see. This is my experience. This is the information that has come to me. And so if it is something that, you know, gets you a little riled up or something like that, you know, love you. I would just pray about it and ask about it, because I'm pretty confident about most of the stuff I'm talking about. Now, of course, there's always like room for error, and maybe it's not exactly this or exactly that, but I do believe that the information that I'm giving is going to lead to the truth. So I will say that. Oh, look, and then we have the Devil card coming out, which is Capricorn, which I am a Capricorn sun. And then we have the Nine of Swords, which the Nine of Swords is a card about, it's really about cutting away other people's opinions. And it's interesting because the Nine of Wands and the Nine of Swords can be a reflective energy in this sense. They're both about defense in a certain way, but the Nine of Wands is more defense towards like your own personal convictions, whereas the Nine of Swords is usually a defense from other people's projections onto you. And then the Devil, the Capricorn, the sacrificial goat, is the one that sits in the middle. So the Devil card can have a few different meanings. Of course, it can mean, you know, addictions to certain things. It can mean, you know, vices. But when I think about it on like a spiritual level, I think about, how would I describe that? When you're at a spiritual level where it's time to take accountability for your actions. In certain belief systems, you still have a spiritual parent, in the sense that the spiritual parent dictates everything that you do, everything that you think. And so your actions in life are dictated based on, how would I say, dictated based on how this parent is going to respond to you, right? Which is like the Nine of Swords energy. Or it's dictated based on not wanting to be in conflict with the people around you, which is kind of the Nine of Wands energy. But when you get to the Devil card, the Capricorn card, it becomes, what is your personal truth, and standing on that, standing on your morals that you have developed, hopefully you've developed, and realizing that the only true way that you are going to grow and ascend to this concept of being at the right hand of the Father when you die is to make sure that you have your own personal convictions, that you are keeping yourself accountable, that you are taking responsibility. And so in that sense, you are no longer, let's say, participating in the sacrifice of Jesus, in the sense of that his blood has to wash you in order for you to be good. It becomes, okay, how can I sit in this moment and choose the right things so that I don't have to use that blanket, I don't have to use that covering. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't still have a relationship, but it means that the relationship changes from one of like an unworthy sinner, or needing to be under this really heavy authority, to one that's more conductive to like a friendship and a leveling energy. I hope that makes sense. Also, with the number 9, we're talking about a level of completion. Okay, so 10 is just a higher, let's say, octave. I'm not sure if that's exactly the word, but the next level of 1. And so the cycle repeats, but at a higher frequency, we'll say. And so 9s are the ending of a cycle, the completion of a whole journey, we'll say, from 0 to 9. So that's really, really powerful. And then the last card we have here is the King of Cups in reverse, with the World card in reverse. Very interesting. So throughout this year, if you see 9s, 21s, those are going to be really, really significant outside of this being a 7 year. So 34, 51, 25. Outside of that, it's going to be important to pay attention to 21s, 3s, and 7s. And so we talk about, look, and then the Chariot card, which is also the number 7. Oh, I've been seeing 37 a lot, actually, now that I think about it. So with the King of Cups in reverse, the King of Cups represents an energy that is emotionally stable. This would be like the ascendant version of a father, like an ideal father. This is someone who can mix their logic and their emotions, where their emotions is the foundation of connection, because true connection comes through a heart space. You can use logic and will and, combating different things, but the most potent form of embracing someone or helping someone to make a change is going to always come from the heart space. It's always a water process. And so that is going to be important in life, to make sure that moving forward, that we're not really making decisions based on fear, based on, what this person is going to think, based on what that person is going to think. And we really try to focus internally about a very simple thing. How does your heart feel about it? Is your heart breaking while you're thinking about this? Is your heart blissful while you're thinking about this? Is it kind of indifferent? That's going to be really important going into the rest of the year, especially going into 2026. 2026, 2027 are going to be very, very big years. This is going to be a huge year, which we're going to get into a little bit later on too. This is going to be a big year too, but it's kind of setting up for 2026, 2027. And that's at more of a universal collective level. So that was our first little portion. I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that as the year progresses, some of that seeps in and makes a lot more sense. Starts bringing some concepts together, maybe bringing some family closer together as well. All right, so let's get into the second portion, which is going to be the dream portion. So we're going to talk about two dreams. So how I'm going to do this is that this topic is so expansive, of course, that it's going to be difficult for me to kind of put a lot of it into just one podcast. Now, along with that, I am going to do a part 2 where I'm going to talk about the other dreams associated to this. But I have a feeling that that is going to be much later in the year, probably in August or at the beginning of September. And as we continue in this podcast today, you'll see why I'm saying that. So today we are going to be talking about 2 of the dreams that I had on December 30th, 2020. So in the first dream, I was, let's say, some of these concepts are going to be kind of hard to explain in English, mainly because there's so many different terms for these things, and some of them I'm not exactly sure how to articulate. And I am like a little bit, stopped up. So excuse me for that. And I'll probably sound really nasally and things like that right now, but I am a little bit stopped up. Okay. Moving forward. The dreams. Okay, so the first dream I had, I was just kind of up in this space. Okay, and in this space, it didn't feel like it was necessarily the cosmos. This felt like it was a bubble of reality, but a very, very big bubble of reality. Almost like it was a constructed reality and not necessarily based on quote unquote real reality. So it's kind of like a construction of people who had very similar viewpoints. Now, along with that, most of the people on planet Earth were a part of this reality. And most of them were on the ground. Okay, so it's like this reality that could look like Earth, but it was almost if you got everybody together with the same belief systems and they all lived on Earth. So it's not really based in, like, let's say, objective reality, but it did kind of look like reality. Okay, and so I'm hovering in the sky, looking down. I'm pretty high up in the sky, and I'm just kind of looking down, right? And so as I'm looking down, I notice that there are people above me who are hovering also. Below me. Below me that are hovering also. But they are closer to the earth. Okay? And I noticed that they were all wearing black. They were all men. They all had beards. And they all had these top hats on. And they all had these curls coming out of the side, like their hair. So under the hat, under the hat, I couldn't tell if they were bald because I could see the curls coming down, but it looked like the curl was only over a certain part of their head. I don't know. It was a very interesting hairstyle choice, but it looked like it was only hair on a piece of it, and then it looked like it could be bald. And so I'm just hovering and I'm just looking. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And in my head, I was like, oh, these must be warlocks, I guess. They must be warlocks because they had, a very interesting style of dress. Everybody was dressed the same. All of the men, relatively looked the same. And so I was like, this is very interesting. What are they doing? And so I'm looking at them, and they are weaving this, how would I say it? They're weaving this energetic web of energy. Okay, so it looks like, the best way I can describe it is like they're weaving energy beams. That's the closest thing you could attribute it to, is like an energy beam. But even energy beams, you can completely see it, and it's very physical. But this one had more of kind of a mist to it also, and the energy wasn't as dense, I guess. It's kind of hard to describe it, but I recognized it as energy lines, or maybe like ley lines or something like that. Okay. And so the ley lines were over top of all of the people that were on Earth, that were on planet Earth. Okay. Now, when I saw it, it was almost like someone had taken a globe, like, the globes, and how they have the paper that surrounds the globe with all of the planet on it. It was like that, and they had taken it and laid it flat. So the Earth itself was not flat, but this was like a flat representation of people on Earth who held the same thought patterns about things. Okay. And so the ley lines were over top of them. Okay, so their energy from their body was connected into these, we'll call them ley lines. And so I'm like, that's uncomfortable. Like, why are they, I was about to say manufacturing, but I don't know if that's not really the right word. Why are they manipulating these ley lines, I would say. But when I think about it, I don't know if they were the ones that put the ley lines there, or if they were just influencing the ley lines. And I'm saying that because the ley lines didn't quite match up with rhyme or reason, I guess. Like I just assumed that if this was like a organic, like ancient ley line system, I guess, that it would be better organized. And it wasn't super well organized. It had some organization to it, but the best I can describe it is like that the math was off. Like the math was not correct. There are missing pockets. Some places didn't have ley lines at all. And maybe those are representing people who like are not connected into the belief system. I'm not exactly sure. So anyways, they were masterminding this ley line that these people were connected into. Okay. And so what I noticed is that the energy that they were putting onto these ley lines were kind of like energetic blockages, so that people would not get above the ley lines energetically and reach out and talk to their ancestors. And so this collective belief system that everyone was under was a belief system that would make sure that people didn't reach out to ancestors, that they didn't go outside a certain bubble of reality to get information. And this was the main reason that they were manipulating these ley lines, so that people did not go outside a certain belief system above these ley lines to talk to their ancestors, talk to any type of energies that weren't within this bubble of reality. to get information outside of them. And when I mean them, I'm talking about these men with girls. Okay. And so then it transitioned to the next dream. And the next dream was quite interesting. So in the next dream, I had I was on a road. And I had the feeling that I had just come from, this is very interesting, I felt like I had just come from some type of spiritual modality that I did not enjoy. And so I was jumping to somewhere else to look at something else. It was almost like a ceremony or ritual or something had happened, and I didn't want to be a part of that. And so I decided to move myself maybe to a different reality bubble. So I'm kind of orienting myself, and as I'm orienting myself, I realize that I am on a road, okay? Now, this is like one of those small kind of roads that's like in between really small towns. You know, very small road, cute, petite. One road with like 2 lanes, one going forward, one going back, okay? Now, the thing about this road is that to the left of me, so if I'm standing on the road and I'm standing sideways, on the left of me, there is overgrown trees on this part of the road to the left. And then on the right is like you're going into the next town or whatever. And so immediately you get the sense that this is a road that people do not travel anymore. They do not take this road anymore. And I'm not even sure how you would turn onto this road to even get to the dead end. But it wasn't a natural dead end. There were trees overgrowing it and things like that. But like if you looked close enough, you could see that there was a road behind it. The other thing that I noticed as I was orienting myself, because it's very much like when you think about a memory. When you think about a memory, you're just kind of in the memory, right? Like you're just kind of in the memory, and then there's a scene that's playing out. That's how a lot of my dreams are, memories. And I'm just watching how the scene plays out, and I'm trying to orient myself to what part of the scene we're in. And so I noticed that all of the trees along the road, okay, so those trees look normal, the wall of trees that you see as you're traveling down a road. Those trees are all standing up like columns. And I'm like, what tree does this? So they're all standing up like columns, okay? So the branches are going straight up, and they even have a kind of boxy look to each specific tree. But I know that they're willow trees. Now, the ones that are overgrowing this road, of course, are also willow, but they are not standing up as columns. They are just randomly intertwined with each other, I would say. Okay. And so as I'm kind of noticing this scene, I also notice that there is a gathering that's going on. So I am in my body, because sometimes in dreams I'm not in my body, but I'm in this body that I know as DeeDee. And I have another quote-unquote black friend. Black doesn't tell like your whole ancestry or whole genetic makeup, but who we would traditionally consider to be black people. There's another black friend who's standing next to me. And then there's a First Nation woman. So I'm going to, instead of calling them Native Americans, I'm just going to call them First Nations. I think I've heard that that's, more respectful. So there's a First Nation woman. Now, what I do notice about us is that we are all wearing relatively modern clothes, I would say. However, there are little pieces on us that represent where the majority of our genetics comes from. So me and my friend, who's also African American, we're wearing like little cute dainty Africa ears, and like our clothes have hints of African prints, but it's very modernized. So if we're walking down the street it's not like what I'm thinking in my head. It's not offensively African, I guess, or unapologetically African. It's like more of like a modern kind of African print. And then also my friend who is First Nation, she was wearing, like a simple white shirt and a really cute dress that also, skirt that looked like it had First Nation beads. She also had these like kind of orange and reddish beads around her neck and a little bit of tribal makeup. And all of it was modernized, I would say. So most of the people, so we're kind of on the outside of this gathering, this group, kind of observing and looking, okay? But most of the people who were in the crowd of this gathering seemed to be First Nation people. I do remember seeing some Asian people, maybe one other African American person, but I will say that I do not recall seeing any person that looked outwardly European or quote unquote Aryan, like blue eyes, blonde hair, Nordic kind of looking. I didn't see any of them there. Okay. And so anyways, we're kind of gathered, and then I noticed that there is a guy who is, let's say, like the star of the show, who everyone is gathered around to look at, okay? And he is racially ambiguous in the sense of I couldn't look at him and quite place where he was from. Now, I do know that he was some type of form of European, but he had very dark hair. He had this dark mole under one of his eyes. He had very thick hair. He was about 5'8" or so. But looking at him, I couldn't tell because I assumed that maybe he also had some First Nation ancestry. But he seemed to be resonating an energy of mostly French. So in the crowd, I did not see any people who necessarily stuck out to me of having European ancestry. Not outwardly, we might have had traces, but nobody was like representing Europe except for this man. Something about him just screamed French to me, but he could have had First Nation ancestry as well. And so I noticed that he is dressed like a teenager who likes bikers. And so he had a very kind of basic, I don't know if it was even cotton. I'm not sure if it was even a cotton shirt because I've seen this material before, and I don't, like, some t-shirts are made out of it and it has like a kind of abrasive feel to it. I don't know exactly what type of texture it was. And I am usually not the person that is like dissecting people's, clothing, like, even focus on textures and all that different thing, like what's high quality, low quality, like that's just not what I focus on. But I was hyper focused on it this time. And not that I was like critiquing him or anything, but he just stuck out to me that he was like a grown man. He looked about 35, 40. But he was dressed like a teenager, and he had this big, huge, velcroed motorcycle cutout on his shirt that looked like it was sewn onto his shirt. And then he had these kind of black cargo pants on, and I think there was also like a little motorcycle patch on there. So he didn't look like a biker, because bikers, they wear leather, silver. I mean, this is stereotypical, but you know what I'm talking about. There's a difference between somebody who is a biker and somebody who admires bikers. And he was dressed as someone who admires bikers. He had, the long white socks on, some type of tennis shoes or whatever. And he had this, I call it a fire pit, but I'm not exactly sure if it's a fire pit. But it was like a circle of different rocks. And some of the rocks were in the ground And so there was a circle, and then there was like a kind of rock wall around that circle. And there's a fire there, sticks, wood, and there's a fire burning. And so I'm kind of looking at my friend, and I'm like, what's going on here? Because pretty much most of the people in the crowd looked very unsure about how they got there, what they were doing there, to be honest. Like, no one looked like, oh, this was a planned gathering that I came to with my family, and we're just waiting for it to get started. Everyone pretty much looked kind of confused as to how they got there, why they were there, and what this guy was going to be doing, which I found very interesting. But when I don't know exactly what's going on, I like to just chill and see how it plays out. So I was like, let me just see what's going to happen here, because it's a very interesting feeling. And so he starts to dance around this fire. And it seemed like an interpretive dance where he was playing with the fire and literally playing with fire, because the dance he was doing, he was kind of like, dancing close to the fire and then getting away from the fire, going close to the fire, then getting away from it. Almost like he was subtly taunting the fire that it wouldn't be able to consume him. Almost like the fire was some type of beast or something that was in a cage and holding on to the hope that it would be able to consume him. And so he was playing with this fire, this beast. He was playing with its emotions, kind of. Like, ooh, you might get me, you might not get me. You might get me, you might not get me. Now, me, as a Virgo rising, I'm like, well, the universe has a very interesting way of doing things. So if the wind starts blowing, it could catch your jacket and then the fire's got you. So I don't know if I keep doing that. But anyways, that's not really the point. So he's doing this dance and everybody is kind of like, okay, this is interesting. And so as he's doing this, I'm like, okay, I guess he must be First Nation as well. But where is his attire? Where's his uniform? Where's his, traditional dress? And so I start to kind of lose interest, because I'm starting to figure, okay, whatever he's trying to do, he's not bringing the uniformed energy, I guess. It's kind of like a priest getting up during mass not wearing his priest garb. And you're like, what? Like, there's a reason that people have certain dress doing certain traditions. And so anyways, he's up there doing whatever. And so I start looking towards we'll call it the road less traveled, because that's what it felt like. I start looking towards the road less traveled. And so as I'm kind of daydreaming about going through these wall of trees, something is like, go look at him. And so I turn back over to him, and now there's this big, huge red heifer, okay? And she's very regal, very gorgeous, but something is not quite right about her. Besides the fact that she literally popped up out of nowhere. Besides that, like, her coat was immaculate. It was this beautiful red rust, kind of orange undertones, golden undertones. Immaculate. Regal, and she was big and healthy looking red heifer, but something was weird about her, because she wasn't moving. And so at the same time that I'm looking at her, everybody around is looking, and you can kind of notice everyone taking a little bit of a gasp, because we're like, okay, like, when in reality did red cows start popping up out of nowhere? Because like, is that a thing now? Is that a thing? So we're like, okay, this is crazy. And it's not really hitting yet. Like, it's not really, we're not really processing it yet. And so we're like, oh, where did this cow come from? Because she wasn't here a second ago. And so at this point, I don't think anybody is considering magic. We're just shocked. Like, the first I guess, response is just like a freeze response. Like, whoa, what is going on here? And so the next thing he does is that, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit graphic, but he takes a little blade from out of one of his pockets and he cuts the cow's head from the bridge of her nose to the back of her head. Okay. And by this time, everybody is like in even more shock. And it's just like you're watching something happen and you don't know what to do. And so you're just frozen, just like, oh, what? And so as he does that, we realize that it's a taxidermied cow. Now, I mean taxidermied in the sense that I don't know if he had stuffed this cow, but there was nothing inside of her. She was hollow. Okay, and so then everybody is going through the next phase of being shocked that the cow looked some type of form of alive, but she was actually dead, and she had been dead for a while, and there was nothing left inside of her. She was completely hollow. So as we're going through the shock of all of this, the next thing we know, he is placing 5 live baby chickens, okay, baby chicks, cute, puffy, and yellow, inside of this cow. And so then we're like, okay, wait, where did these little chickens come from? And why are you placing them inside of this cow? Now, as he's putting them in there, I kind of sort of see that he has a wand. Now, I don't know if I didn't notice the wand before or what, but I noticed he has a wand. And when I noticed the wand, I'm like, okay, something immediately started flooding memories into my mind. And not exactly like specific memories, like I was specifically seeing things, but it was like this flooding of a certain type of energy that I remembered from somewhere. I don't know where I remembered it from, but it was like something within me started recognizing and putting all the signs together. And I was like, oh, he's trying to do a black magic ritual to awaken this red heifer. He's trying to do some type of magic ritual to bring this heifer back to life. That's when I'm like, okay, I need to go look at those trees on the road less traveled to figure out my exit strategy. Because I'm about to get up out of here, okay? Because I don't, oh, no. And so my brain is just running. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, have you thought about this? Like, I'm like, you couldn't have thought about this. Like, you couldn't have sat down and weighed all the pros and cons of this and still came to the conclusion. Sorry, I was holding my phone in my shirt, so hopefully that's not messing up the sound too much. It might be, but I'm holding it now. But anyway, so oh my gosh, he's like he's putting these chicks in there, and I realized that he's trying to do some type of resurrection spell. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to be looking on how to get out of here because ain't no way. And so I look towards the trees, and I'm trying to envision myself walking through the trees and trying to kind of see if I could figure out what to expect. Because by this time, I'm like, okay, this man is trying to bring some cow back to life, and he's using chickens and wands and stuff. And I'm like, this road hasn't been traveled in a while. I don't know what could possibly be on that road. And so I look back again, okay, at the guy. This time, the cow actually gets reanimated, okay? And she's doing slight dances. Okay, this was wild. And the next thing I know, it literally transforms from a red heifer into this huge, tall, white man, okay? And in my head, I'm like, is that Paul Bunyan? Like, I'm highly confused now, because how did it transform from a literal female animal that wasn't alive to now a living animal that all of a sudden has the need to dance to a whole male human? I'm like, oh no. So by this time, when it transforms into a man, everybody is starting to scatter now. Everybody is running. Like, look, I don't know what this is, but we have to go, because he is wilding. Okay? And so at this point, everybody is scattered. We're like, oh, no. Not today. Okay? Not today. So this thing gets to running. Okay? This thing gets to running. And so everybody is running, trying to figure out which way to go. And my first pull was to run through the trees. Okay? But I was like, I don't want to run through the trees because I thought I was awake. And I was like, I guess this is just a thing in reality now, because reality is so crazy anyway. I've seen so many things in reality. I'm just like, okay. It takes a lot to really shock me at this point. But I guess this is just a thing now, and I don't want to be a part of it. And so I was like, I can't go through those trees, because who knows what is in those trees. They have shape-shifting cow humans and all type of stuff. I don't know what's through the trees. So I was like, you know what, let me just run the other way with the people. So I run with them, and the next thing I know, I run into some type of way. One of my ancestors, I run into his house. Okay? And there's less people in there now, but they're all still running throughout the house. They're all still scattered throughout the house. And I kind of start to get the suspicion that he's only really running after me. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. So now I'm feeling bad, because I'm like, I don't know if he's specifically running after me, but if he is, I'm putting all these people at risk. And so I run to this bathroom to kind of see, which didn't make the most amount of sense, because then I was closed into the bathroom. But anyways, I run into the bathroom and I close the door, and it's only running after me. So when I'm in the bathroom, I see my friend that I started with. Well, actually, she wasn't in there first, actually, now that I think about it. So it's just my First Nation friend who was in there. And I'm like, girl, isn't this crazy how this giant, it was a giant, how this giant is coming after us? And she was like, I really think he's only running after you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so afraid of that. I think he's only running after me too. So he's like banging on the door, okay? I don't know how this door, it was wild. So I'm like, okay, how are we going to get out of here? And I'm thinking about really her, because I'm like, she's in here with me, and something could happen to her just because she's in the vicinity. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so wild. So next thing I know, though, my other black friend phases through the door, and she shapeshifts into one of my children. And I'm like, what? And I kind of saw that, but we were like in such fight or flight mode right now, because this big old giant, that I didn't quite process that in the moment. I was just kind of like, how did you get in here? And she was like, I don't know. So anyways, he's banging on the door, and I'm like, okay, quick, I have to think of something, because if he gets in here, like, I'm okay, I guess, with like myself getting hurt, because I'm gonna figure something out. But I have to protect them, because I don't want something to happen to them just because they were in the vicinity. So I get this bright idea. And I'm like, I have to connect to his mind, and I have to bend it somewhere else. So literally, as he's banging on the door, I put my back to the door, and I imagine myself connecting mind to mind with him. And when I formed the connection, it looked like an energy beam. Okay, it looked like a very thick energy beam. And honestly, when I really think about it, it kind of reminds me of the, I don't want to pronounce this wrong, fascist. Is that where we get fascist from? Fasces, Fasces, I think that's how you spell it. You know, and it's like this kind of bow. Oh, is that correct? Is it? It's like this bundle of arrows or something linked together. But I've seen that in a dream, and there was an energy beam coming out of it, which is a whole nother dream I'm gonna talk about a whole nother time. But that's kind of what it looked like, an energy bundle of energy rods. I don't know. And so we're connecting mind to mind. And when I did that, I saw that he actually had another beam, that was coming out of the back of his head that was actually bent upwards. And I was like, oh, something is streaming in through him, trying to get to me. And so I was like, I don't have time to figure out who's upset right now, because right now I have to make sure that these people are okay. And so literally I just imagined like my half of the energy frequency, and I bent his. And that bent him right on out of the house and away from us. And that's when I woke up. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the third segment. Okay. So here I am going to go ahead and give a few disclaimers, because I am going to leave all the disclaimers here, and I'm not going to do them in any future podcast. I just believe that, when you come to the information, if you resonate with it, even if you don't, the universe has a way of, showing information, whether this information is helping to see perspective, or if it's shoring you up in your own belief system, it has some type of purpose. So here are my few disclaimers before we get into this information, because of course, religion and belief systems are very touchy for some people. And I'm going to talk about it in relation to how I feel about it, which is, in general, I'm really not concerned too much about whatever someone's religious belief is, with the asterisk mark of unless it has something to do with harming someone else or harming, something. So, what you believe doesn't really bother me or anything like that. But if you're using it to weaponize things, that's when I do have an issue. And even when I do have an issue, I also realize that what this world has shown me is that everything has a growth process. And so I'm just saying that to say that sometimes I can talk very matter-of-factly, and it can seem like I'm being cold, or it could seem like I'm being nonchalant about something. And that's not really the case. I just am putting the facts out there. And then I'm trying to put the pieces together just like everyone else. So some of the stuff that I found, especially when we're talking about major religions, some people might be like, that's not how the story goes. That's not how the story goes. I'm talking about what I've seen in dreams and what I have been, the information that I have been led to by my guides, ancestors. I do believe that this higher power also is involved in it as well. So that's where I'm getting it from. And I do believe that they're all connected. Over like the 10 years that I have been dreaming, I've only been writing down about a year and a half of those 10 years. Now, of course, I was dreaming when I was little too, but taking it seriously as far as like, oh, my dreams are actually predicting the future or something like that within like the last 10. And what I have noticed is that my dreams have a very interesting way of linking things together that would seem like they are not linked. But in actuality, the link to it is so old that some people might not be aware of it. Like, you know, unless you're in that country of origin and you have information passed down to you, or someone has gone to that place of origin and written down old traditions or something like that, or someone has really, really studied language and things like that. So what I'm saying is, even though it might not seem linked, maybe that's not what you have heard in your religion, stay open to it, because there is some type of link. And over this podcast, over this time that we're going to spend together on YouTube and other platforms at some period in time, we will get to the truth. We're going to get to the truth, okay? But I'm telling you things that are connected in some type of way. So that's my little disclaimer. I'm not going to make that disclaimer again, just because, you know, I don't feel like I have to say it all the time. So there's that. So the analysis portion. Now, since I didn't do too much research into this group of Jewish people, I am not going to say too much about them. The two things that I would say, these are the Hasidic Jewish people that were over the ley lines, making sure that people did not connect into their ancestors or into, above the ley line, so that they would get information from some other type of being. Now, what I will say is that this could be a representation, any type of group or religious sect of Christianity, or any type of religious sect, it always has an origin point. And when we're talking about the origin point, something that I have learned personally is that you really have to have a really good grasp on the original person or original people who come up with something and create something, because it has a very key element into how everything plays out. There was a person that started Christianity, though it has developed into this own identity and everything like that. When you go to the origins, there was a person, a group of people who started this as a religion, and it transformed into a worldwide, planet-wide religion. When you think of things like the Satanic Church, there's a person who started it. And I'm saying that because everything has an origin point. They have sources of origin. So you would have to go back to childhood, how they were raised, and this influences how things play out. So what I will say about the Hasidic Jews, what I will say about them is, number one, this piece of hair, this tuft of hair that they have is reminiscent of an Egyptian style, of a very similar one. Now, I think in Egypt, the tuft of hair was at the back of the head, towards the bottom of their head, connected like by their neck, kind of like, what are those little things that was like a thing at one time? It's kind of like it's not really like a mullet, but I think they might call it like a little rat tail. It was like that, but it is reminiscent of that in some type of way. Now, there is something very specific about either the brain structure or something like that this hair is covering is also really important. And I also get that it's very, very metaphysical in nature as well. Now, there's a lot that I could say about top hats, but I'm not even going into that. But that's the one thing that I would say about this group of Jewish people. Now, the thing that I would say to people is that in general, and some people, this might take a while to get what I'm saying, but in general, you want to get to a point to where even if God himself manifested in front of you, that you have such strong, emotional, loving, secure, for the highest case scenario, intentions for the people that you love, that there's no deity in the cosmos that could separate you in death. That is very, very true, because when we get into that level of love and respect and honor and deep appreciation for our loved ones, there's no dimension, there's no hell, there's no river Styx, there's no hellish realm, there's no place that you won't go to go fish them out, period. And I want to make that very clear, that there should not be, at the end of life, let's say, because we'll give you a whole lifetime to figure this out. At the end of life, there should not be any type of deity, being, God, belief system, traditions, street corner, whatever possible belief system that would separate you from the people that you love in death. Now, coming from someone who also does past life regressions, and we're talking about the lives in between lives, look, that siren is going on. So we're talking about death right now, and I'm talking about, it's getting louder. We're talking about the depths of how far you would go to connect to your loved one. Now, I'm going to tell you this. In retrospect, as spirits having a human experience, you really should be to a point to where you would come in knowing exactly who you are incarnating with. There really shouldn't be a concept necessarily really of a past life, because that implies that you have, throughout all time, space, reality, coming into this new body, there were no past relationships in the past life. I'm going to say that with an asterisk mark, but past relationships and things like that were strong enough to keep your memories intact. Now, you think about that, that's pretty sad. And I'm saying an asterisk mark because I do believe that there are certain people, though, that when we come into this life, we instantly remember them. So maybe you didn't remember them before, you couldn't sense them on the planet and things like that. But when you come in contact with them, there is a remembrance of them. And that's because at some point in this universe, in this very, very strange development of the spirit, throughout multiple timelines, throughout multiple lives of existence, throughout the whole entirety of God itself, you do remember them. Their presence triggers a memory of connection and bond that you have shared. This is what I'm talking about, this feeling. And when you remember that and you expound on that, there is no place that you won't go to make sure that they're okay. And if they're not okay, there's no place you won't go to try to help them out and figure out what everybody needs to be okay. If my loved ones end up in hell, I'm diving in to go find them. Be like, look, Lucifer, Satan, God, it's time for a group meeting because I love this person. They've done X, Y, and Z in life. We need to figure out what kind of penance they need, what type of amends they need to make to get them out of this situation. I'm intercessing. Okay, those are like the first things that I'm saying, okay? So then the next topic that I want to talk about, so that's all I'm going to say about Hasidic Jews, because I did not do a really in-depth, viewpoint on them or anything like that, so I don't really have too much to say about that. But maybe in the part 2, maybe I'll go into it. Because in part 2, we do talk about retrieving people. So that'll be a whole nother conversation later on in the year, probably like August, September, something like that. Okay, so going on to the red heifer dream. Now, this dream, I do believe, is a prophecy of something to come in September. Personally, I think that there's going to be something major that's going to happen the first week of September. And we're going to get into why I believe that. Okay. So the willow trees. Let's talk about the willow trees first, because I have this happen very frequently in dreams where they're very specific about what shows up in dreams, and I don't always know exactly what I'm looking at in the dream. As far as like, I knew that they were trees. I knew that, if they weren't standing up like a column, it looked like they would billow over, because I did see the road less taken, the trees in front of them, they were all intertwined and like chaotic and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, they kind of look like willow trees. But what I noticed about these willow trees is that when I looked at it, it looked silver. And I was like, why does it look silver? And there's like a brief moment in the dream where I actually like kind of used my eyes to zoom in on the leaves, and they actually had these silver hairs on the leaf. I don't know if they were actually silver, but it created the illusion of it being silver. But it was green leaves and they had hairs, and the hairs were creating the illusion of it looking silver. Now, when I looked that up, what I came to now, like I said, I'm not like perfect at identifying trees and stuff like that. But when I looked up this type of willow, what I found was the Salix alba tree. And I felt that that was one of the connections, because there was a friend of mine that I had reconnected with, and we were talking about Jose Silva, and one of his friends that introduced him to Laredo, Texas, where Jose Silva was from. This guy, his last name was Alba, or something like that, or he was from a place called something Alba. And so I was like, oh, okay, this has to be the tree. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that's the same tree as Pussy Willow, but that's the tree that showed up as the main willow tree. Now, I found something the other day that I want to read to you guys about Pussy Willow. And they have little catkins on there. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, okay, here we go. Okay. Now, there's a lot of reasons as to why I'm bringing this up, and I'm not going to talk about all of them right now, because that'll be its own world to go into. That'll be its own world to go into. But when I noticed that this magician was holding a wand, okay, most wands are made from wood, from trees, okay, and they're actually this was probably about 2 months ago, maybe in February. There's really strong messages about rod. And a wand is also called a rod sometimes. And there is a Slavic deity named Rod, R-O-D. He was a Slavic deity. And so I was like, okay, why is Slavic coming up? Okay, so I'm going to read this to you. It's very interesting. Okay, so the cat willow was considered sacred to the Eastern Slavs as a symbol of continuity and stability of life. This tree is associated with the pagan god Yarilo, which a friend and I encountered an aspect of this in a dream, which is also, we believe, where we get the name for the color yellow, Yarilo. Even nowadays, people decorate the flowers and ribbons on Kupula's Eve. Name it Mara, okay? Now, if you have heard the name Mara before, which is connected to Mary, Mara, then you know that Mara is connected to the mare, the nightmare. Now, if you've not heard of the nightmare, this is considered in certain religion, traditional belief systems, I'll say. The nightmare is the night hag, okay? The night hag is supposed to be a witch or some type of intuitive person who has the ability to tap into someone's dream space and influence them. They also, to higher degrees, have the ability to tap into astral realms and influence the astral realms, which influences physical reality. So they are called the Mara or mare nightmare. This is also the image of the rider of the black horse, death, plague, things like that. We're talking about people who have abilities to sit on the cusp of dimensions and realities. Some might have the ability to take you out in the dream state. That's like on a whole nother level though. Okay, this is also the image of winged horses. When you had a nightmare, where you have sleep paralysis and you're unable to move, some people call that being witch-ridden, being hag-ridden, meaning that there is someone in your energy field who is trying to, freeze you. Now, some people also, and that is also a thing where, we believe that, the sleep paralysis is to make sure that while you're living out dreams that you don't do something crazy and actually harm yourself. But from doing QHHT sessions, I can definitely tell you, in other experiences that I'll talk about later on, is that, sometimes people definitely can get out of sleep paralysis, and if someone really wanted to, they could walk around as well. So sleep paralysis works on a certain level of the mind to a certain degree, but there are instances where sleep paralysis is not a thing. Okay. So that's Mara. Now, I think it's also interesting if you watch the TV show 1899, then the main person in there is Mara. I'm not going to give away the TV series, but just knowing what I'm telling you, and if you go watch it, you see it from a whole different perspective. Along with that, the name of one of the ships, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, is Cerobus, I don't know, but it's the hellhound that they actually try to keep in the gates of the underworld, which is significant because these hellhounds probably represent the three goddesses of fate. Okay, the three triple goddess, three goddesses of fate, which also Anubis in the Egyptian pantheon is also associated to the underworld. And these three goddesses of fate deal with literally how much time a human is allotted, how long their life is going to be, and then they determine the actual moment where they transition from this world to the next. So you could see why they would want to keep it gated. You can see why they want to keep it gated, okay? Because they're trying to cheat death in a sense. Okay, so anyways, let me go back to this because that's a whole another reality in and of itself. Okay, so some sources mention a custom to plant branches of ritual pussy willow in the yards after the celebration. However, it is common knowledge among Eastern Slavs that planting this willow is a bad omen. The one who plants it prepares a spade for his own burial. According to folk beliefs, especially an old and gnarly tree was cursed by God. Christian Slavs believed that tormentors of Christ made the spikes that held the cross together of pussy willow. Another legend says that nails were used to crucify Jesus were also made of this willow. This is why peasants believe that worms frequently eat it. And this tree serves as a home to demons, especially the old and gnarly one or the dry one. Belarusians thought that demons sat on it since Epiphany Day until Palm Sunday. Wait, I'm not sure what he's trying to say. Thought that the demons sat on it. I think he means from Epiphany Day until Palm Sunday. And once the willow branches were blessed on Palm Sunday, the demon fell in the water, and this is why water collected under the willow from Palm Sunday until Easter could not be consumed. Okay. So I thought that was very interesting because, of course, today is Easter. And so now the waters of this tree, well, after today, I guess, would be able to be consumed again. So it was very interesting because that's what I definitely felt like this guy was summoning, like some type of weird black magic type of situation, and the trees were surrounding everyone, and we were trying to figure out what in the world was going on. And I forgot to mention, which I guess I can, well, I'll just mention this quickly, that the Paul Bunyan type of figure, he also looked to be French. Now, I can't quite pinpoint on him what made me believe that he was French, but he definitely seemed to have a lot of French ancestry. Okay, so after I had this dream, I called up a family member because the feeling I had when I woke up was that it was biblical. And the last time I had a biblical dream, COVID broke out. And I'm not saying that COVID or some other disease or something like that is going to break out, but I do believe that there's something big coming this year. Now, when I called this loved one, I was calling her to see what the significance of this red cow is and how it is intricate into Christianity in general. And so what I ended up finding out through her and then some other research, I found out that the red heifer was significant in the wilderness with Moses. Okay, and that the red heifer was used as an atonement ritual. That if someone comes in contact with a dead body, they are to slaughter a red cow, and this will cleanse them of coming in contact with a dead corpse. And I believe that still goes on to this day. Now, the significance of the unblemished red cow is that the unblemished red cow, once it is born, would be a sign to the Jewish people, non-messianic Jews who do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah, who are still doing Passover and these things, waiting for the Messiah to come. The red cow, in a sense, is their Messiah. Well, not their Messiah, but is the... why am I thinking about fox in the hole? Is that like the phrase, like the last sign before the Messiah comes? So when this unblemished red cow means that it hasn't been worked, it hasn't been pregnant, there's no, spots or anything on its coat, that when that is born on the earth, and I'm guessing earth, but I'm going to talk about that later, when that cow is born, they will take that as a sign from their God that they can rebuild the third temple, which I'm guessing is the Temple of Solomon. They'll rebuild the third temple, and with the third temple, they will begin animal sacrifice again in the temple, and this will magnetize their Messiah. So this is the case of two messiahs. This is very easy. What they read in the Bible with their Torahs, they have been led to believe that their Messiah has not come. And so they're going to rebuild the third temple and magnetize their Messiah. Christians believe that Jesus was the last sacrifice, that the third temple, I don't know if they don't think that it's necessary other than prophecy of the Antichrist. But they believe that the fulfillment of the law was Jesus and that he will be returning back in 2,000 years. I'm not sure if it is 2,000 years. So all of these things are still exciting for Christians because the rest of what the Jewish people are living out is supposed to be prophecy of letting them know that when the third temple goes up and they start doing animal sacrifice again, that eventually their Messiah will show up, which is the Antichrist, which is the Jewish Messiah, would be the Antichrist according to Christians. And then when the Antichrist shows up, Jesus is going to show up. They're going to duel. Jesus is going to win. And then there's going to be 1,000 years of peace after that. Hopefully more. Okay. Now, when I talked to this relative, I found out that in September last year, this is 2 months before I had this dream, in September last year, when I talk about the other thing, it's going to really blow your mind. In September last year, there were five unblemished red cows that have been bred on a farm in Texas. And when I told her the part about the cow shapeshifting into this big, tall Paul Bunyan type figure, she was like, oh girl, that's Big Tex. And somebody had actually destroyed Big Tex. I can't exactly remember how Big Tex met his end. I think it was supposed to be like a really big thing. Wait, I'm gonna look it up because that'd be very interesting if they burn Big Tex. Big Tex. Let me see. Big Tex, official greeter and icon of the State Fair of Texas. Now when I look at like the Big Tex pictures, that's not what he looked like. He definitely had like the checkered shirt, white and blue, I think, checkered shirt with overalls and the green thing. He didn't have a hat on. He had brown kind of shaggy hair. and stuff like that. But for some reason, I'm also thinking that he could have also had Portuguese ancestors as well, like French and Portuguese, maybe. Like, as I'm kind of thinking about it, he kind of looked like an extension of the quote-unquote shaman that summoned him. And maybe he looked a bit Portuguese. Maybe that's it. But anyways, I think somebody burned Big Text or something like that. Took down Big Text. So anyways, they found these unblemished cows, and then they actually shipped them over to Israel. And they're going to keep them for a year, which would be September this year. Keep them for a year to make sure that they don't develop any blemishes or anything like that. And if they stay perfect for a year, they're going to go ahead and start building the third temple. Woo! Now, why this dream was also really significant is because October 27th last year, that's before they shipped these cows off, October 27th last year, I had a wonderful Akashic Record reading from a woman. And she facilitated my Akashic Record reading. And I might do like a whole separate podcast at some point on this as well, because this is going to be like a planet-wide kind of situation, I believe, in September. And if it doesn't actually like start planet-wide in September, something in September, maybe these cows or something like that, is definitely going to be the catalyst for something that's coming for the whole world. Definitely. So anyways, I had a Akashic Record reading, and this red cow made an appearance in October on the 27th. She made an appearance. And in this appearance, I was actually rescuing her from being sacrificed, and we ran into the desert. Now, with this Akashic Record reading, I'm trying not to say all of it, because it's like a lot of information. I don't want to like overwhelm with a lot of information, and one thing can lead to like a whole nother reality. So I'm kind of trying to stay within the confines of what I'm talking about and then just leave this for like another podcast to go into, more details or whatever. But I didn't even look at the red cow in a biblical sense at that point, because I was actually in the Lakota tribe in the Americas. And so it didn't even cross my mind to look into the Bible at that point. But with this dream in December, it definitely had a biblical vibe. Now, when we look at the red cow, which is called Param Adumah, I believe that it was in the Quran. I could be mistaken, but I believe it was in the Quran, or maybe the Talmud. Maybe it was the Talmud. I can't exactly remember. But in one of the accounts, it gives more detail about what happened surrounding this red heifer and this corpse, okay? So from what I understand, I think it was the golden calf situation. And then there was actually an Israelite that was killed in connection to this golden calf situation. And what they did the atonement for was actually for them killing this Israelite. In general, when you're talking about witchcraft and things like that, outside of Jewish tradition, in general, and I feel like this is really good to say in general, because certain people kind of get this confused. Killing something, slaughtering something, whatever, is never an offering. Never an offering. Even in the Bible, they make a distinction between an offering and something that's done for atonement. Okay? Killing or slaughtering something is always a sacrifice. Human, animal, whatever, is always a sacrifice. It is never an offering. On Valentine's Day, you offer your loved one chocolates and flowers. You offer them a dead cat or some slaughtered animal. It's going to be strange, to say the least. Offerings and sacrifices are not the same. Atonement is atonement for yourself. This is not atonement for the world. This means that the wager of sin is death, and you are going to put the life of an animal as your atonement, as your placeholder for your death, to give you more time to try to work things out before you die and have to go to hell. Now, I'm saying that kind of facetiously, not literally. Please don't take this literally in the sense of like, I'm telling you this is what you should do. I'm telling you more of like the more original energies of this. And so this red cow and sprinkling the ashes of this burned cow for a cleansing ritual is not just about the fact of touching a dirty corpse that defiles you. Now, maybe it has turned into that because it hasn't been fully explained, but the original reason as to why people, or a more original reason as to why people did sacrifices and things like that, was because whatever sin they did, the punishment for that was death. And so how they figured out a loophole to dying was to offer a different energy source instead of theirs, which would be animals. Animals were like the energetic currency. Like, oh, you could have my life, but what if I give you 20 chickens instead? And then give me some time to get myself together. Give me some time, and I promise that I will atone for this in life by doing some good deeds, by, bringing some people to your religion, whatever the contract is. Okay. Now, the gag is that blood atonement is not really a thing. It's not really a thing. 25 chickens. I'm thinking about someone who said that they did that to beat a case. It's not really a thing. It just delays whatever is inevitably going to happen, whether you get it in this life or in the next life. So it doesn't totally take away your accountability, and it's not a great substitution, because not only at the end of life are you going to have to pay for whatever you did, but now you're going to have to pay for whatever you killed also. So just putting that out there. And I feel like I'm being so direct and stuff with this because there's going to be a revving up of people who are going to be sacrificing. People who are going to be sacrificing animals, especially if they're more into the kind of magical world or certain traditions where sacrifice is necessary. They're going to start feeling really, really intense pulls for sacrificing, because on a world stage in September, that might actually become a reality where one of the world powers, one of the, places of the seven, wonders of the world, we're talking about one of the biggest places throughout history is going to take up animal sacrifice. That's huge. And so it's going to send ripples out. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to affect Christian people, but it probably is going to seriously affect Jewish people, because of course this would be their Messiah coming. So it's going to be very interesting, to say the least. Now, we talk about exactly who I believe the red cow is. Well, let me say this before we get into that. whatever is going on, whatever is going to get started is inevitably going to fail. I do want to say that. It's inevitably going to fail for a multitude of reasons. But one of the reasons is that there's a certain way that things have to be done. And in general, your animals are an extension of you. Once you take them into your house, you're the one nourishing and feeding them energetically. They become a part of your family. Why am I saying that? Because in order for them to actually magnetize this energy they're talking about, their Messiah, this red cow would have to be born on their soil, come from a bloodline of people and a family of people raising it that are connected to their Messiah, not Texas. Now, the person in Texas might have some Jewish ancestry, but where the cow is born matters. And there are some other things, I don't want to get too deep into that, but the overall feeling of it was looking at the point that this red cow they were trying to resurrect had died a very long time ago. She was not there at all. There was no remnants of her. And they were resurrecting this cow, trying to resurrect this cow through artificial means, by energies that weren't equal to her, in the sense that, chickens are not cows. They're not the same size, they're not the same makeup, and especially not baby chickens. So like a baby chicken cannot reanimate and sustain energy of a female red cow. And I believe that that's why eventually with the shift that took place, why it couldn't hold that frequency and it started transitioning into something from probably a long time ago, but something a part of this shaman's bloodline. And so it gave him some type of energy to be more than quote unquote human, which I believe is probably a Nephilim, a giant, a Nephilim. So that's definitely important to say, but I do believe that this red heifer is, some probably would come to the conclusion that it's Hathor. However, I would come to the conclusion that it's probably Newt. It's a form of Newt, which, just for fun, her Egyptian name I saw, as far as I know, was NWT, and that is the same anagram for New World Translation. Okay, so let's see, because I have my little notes here that I'm looking through and make sure that I pretty much covered everything. Okay. Yes, the blood involved. Sept, being drunk on blood. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm going to talk about this really quickly, too. And I'm just kind of skimming over this, but when I do the second part, I'll come back to that. So the actual first part of Param Adumah, which is Param, is very interesting because sometime last year, there's a friend and we share dreams together, information together. Like, we dream about similar things. We get intuitive messages for each other. And there's an intuitive message that she had about this guy who is chief information officer, I believe, for one of the governmental organizations. And his name was also some form of Param, something like that. But he had Para in his name, Para, which, in Spanish is for, para. And so I looked it up, and I believe that he was an Indian guy. When I looked it up, it said that para actually meant supreme. It meant royal. It meant, what was the other word that they used? Oh my gosh, what was the other word? It was a very specific word. What was it? Like, first among men. I can't think of it right now. But it was a way of describing and alluding to the supreme being in India, which was para. Now, I can't exactly remember who the goddess Para was, and this goddess was before Parvati. Before Parvati, there was another Para. So I thought that was interesting, that Adumah also, kind of relates to Adam, which there's many different Adams and many different creation stories. Mesopotamia, there's, Adam in certain parts of Africa, stuff like that. So I did want to add that little connection because I thought that was very, very interesting. Okay. Yep, I talked about that. Okay. Yeah, I think that is pretty much all of the stuff that I wanted to... Oh, no. And this is also something interesting. That willows are also called Sally. So if you know any Sallys, that's connected to the willow tree. Oh yeah, and Willoughby, the last name Willoughby's. I think I had an ancestor and his middle name was Willoughby or Woolery. But sometimes I saw it as Willoughby, and Willoughby actually means like a collection of willow trees, a forest of willow trees, something like that. So Willoughby is also connected to willows. All right, my friends. Well, this has been a very, very long podcast. If you've gotten through it and seen the description, you've probably already seen, but I am going to do timestamps because it was long. Okay, and then I'm also going to do this fun little idea as well, so that you can start seeing some of the connections that I'm seeing. After each video, I'm going to say a series of numbers. And when you see this series of numbers out in the world, to know that it is connecting to some of the information I have said in this podcast. So all the podcasts, I'm going to number them. So like podcast episode number 1. Maybe even make it seasons to make it very easy to like go back and find the information as well as the timestamps. But there'll also be a number after it. And like I said, that number is going to be syncing it into the information from the podcast. So when you see the number out in life, to take notice to it, because something that you're doing right now or something that you see could be a license plate. Someone could be talking about something. Make sure that you get a little journal, or you have a podcast, or you have a PDF file or something like that. That's like a daily journal that you can write things down. Write it down and write down what is going on or what's connected to it. So, my numbers, when you see this, and I'm not saying that I'm the only one connected to it. I'm not saying that. I'm just using it as a marker that this also is connected to DeeDee. So, of course, my birthday, 12/26. All of the podcasts, all of the content that I post on my channel will all come out at 12/26, aside from this one. Or maybe I'll wait just to do it. Maybe I'll wait till tomorrow morning at 12/26 to post it, because it is the day after Easter that you can drink from the waters of the willow. I might do that. I'm not sure. I'm going to see. So 1226, 629, 383, 833. And I even claim 838 as well. And then some of my higher selves are connected to 353. Okay. This podcast is going to be connected to the number 858. I started talking at 858. I went into Whole Foods and they have the bathroom code, and the bathroom code was 8585. And I'll tell even a little bit of fun story to kind of give you why 858 is significant to me and why I've been writing it down. So before we moved to Arizona, which I will talk about that at some point, before we actually really committed to it, I saw us moving to Mesa. Now, at the time, I did not know it was Mesa because I did not know anything about Arizona. But I knew that we were somewhere that was not directly Phoenix, and I had been getting all of this information about the term Mesa and how in certain mythology stories after the deluge, there is some being that is sent down from the heavens that pulls a mesa or a mound out of the water, and that is where life restarts. Now, like I said, probably at a later date, I'll talk a little bit more about that and the manifestation of moving to Arizona, which was wild. But I saw this house in Mesa, and it was a greenhouse. It was like olive colored green. It was kind of like a ranch style house, I think. And it was a part of a neighborhood. And so this year, when we're able to finally get out of the hotel, actually the first stable place that we stayed in for a month during the Super Bowl was actually the exact house that I saw in the dream. And the house was actually not in Mesa. It was actually in Scottsdale. Okay. And the address on that place was 8148, which I just shortened it to 858. I was like, okay, 858. And while we were in that place, we found our place that is in Mesa. And so I was like, okay, they're kind of superimposed with each other, but me seeing the olive green house, especially out in Arizona, because a lot of Arizona has desert architecture, where it's not like every single house is different colors, you know. Of course, they might have certain places, but, you know, most of the houses are tan, you know, brown, stuff like that, desert architecture. And so seeing a green place would stick out. And that green place also had a blue door, which the next place that we stayed in for a little bit of time, that green place had a red door, actually. It had a red door. And then the next place we stayed in for a little bit of time had a blue door, and now the place that we stay in now has a red door again. So anyways, it was kind of like this marker in my mind. I didn't know how we were going to get there. I didn't even know if I thought it was like, you know, not necessarily a real thing, but, you know, I didn't really know what to make of it. But as soon as we pulled into the place in Scottsdale for that month, I knew that it was the place that I had seen in the dreams before. It was absolutely wild. So anyways, that's the story of 858. So if you are thinking about moving somewhere and you have already had visions about where you're going to move to, hold the faith, because that prophecy of us moving to Mesa took 2 years to come to fruition, like a year and a half, but like a year and a half to come to fruition. So I got that vision a year and a half before, and that was before we even committed to actually even moving to Arizona. So I didn't know what time frame. I'm like, when are we getting the greenhouse? And then even when I got the greenhouse, I thought that the Scottsdale house was like the end of it, and it wasn't. It was like, I was like, oh, I guess the house was in Scottsdale. But then a whole bunch of things started happening in this house that led us to be able to actually move to Mesa instead of staying in Tempe. So it was all about transitions, holding the faith, manifestation, believing the prophecy, and everything. So the number for this podcast is 858. Oh, and what is that? What is the 8th letter of the, that just popped in my head. Wait, what is the 8th letter of the alphabet? I know E is the 5th one. Let me see. 8th letter of the alphabet. Ooh, it's 12 o'clock. Okay. The 8th letter is H. Oh, H-E-H. Oh my gosh. That's an Egyptian deity. Hold on. Hey, which is actually where we get ha from, like the expression ha. And we also get hey from it too. That's actually an Egyptian deity. Hold on. What do they normally call him? Oh, yeah, that's his name. H-E-H. Wow. Ha, hua, hehu was the personification of infinity or eternity in the Ogdad in ancient Egyptian religion, and his name originally meant flood. That's what I'm telling you. Like the deluge. And the mesa is the mound that they pulled out of the deluge after the flood. That's what the deluge is, because everyone might not know that. After the flood, they pulled the earth, the mound, the mesa, out of the waters for land, for people to start inhabiting the land again. Inhabiting the land again. And yeah, there's actually another Egyptian deity who's actually called floodwaters. But that's a whole nother conversation. So I can't get into that right now, child. I can't get into that. But that is wild. Okay, I'm going to read one more thing about hay. And then I'm going to get up off of here because I got to go home. Okay, his name originally meant flood, referring to the watery chaos Nu that the Egyptians believe existed before the creation of the world. Ooh, goodness, child. Limitless time and long life. Hey, in Egyptian religion, defied abstractions, personifying respectively creative command, authoritative utterance, or perception. Oh, and his symbol is the palm branch. Okay, well, that makes sense because, in a lot of traditions, the palm branch is always associated to the sacred divine bloodline. Palms are very, very, sacred. Very sacred plants. Yeah, and in Scottsdale, actually, there were a lot of palm trees around the house. And just me being new to the desert, because, actually, they had a palm tree outside of, I see some palm trees now. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, they have a few palm trees out here. But I noticed that in Scottsdale, they had, like, these 2 huge palm trees. Like, I mean, they were so tall. It was, like, the tallest palm trees I'd ever seen. And I was like, this is so interesting. Sia served as crew members in the solar bark of the sun god Re. They were represented in an undistinctive form as bearded men and also served as bearers of the eye of the god Horus. In the text known as the Memphite theology, they personified the tongue and the heart of the god Ptah. Now, that's very significant because we talk about God speaking the word, and the word became living. So that has all to do with the mouth and the tongue and the throat. Hay was a personification of infinite space and was portrayed as a squatting man with his arms outspread, bearing the symbols of many years of life and of happiness. Well, there goes that. When the math adds up, the math adds up. And that is all I have for you guys today. Who is playing this music outside? Okay, they literally cut it off when I said that. They literally cut it off when I said it. Sounds like some old time 60s, 70s love song or something. Maybe even older than that, you know, like black and white love songs. Okay, anyways. So that's what I have for you guys today. Hopefully it wasn't too spicy. I feel like I was on the spicier side today. But hopefully it wasn't too spicy and you got a lot from it, and I hope that it starts to help you also connect the dots. And if you heard some things in there that I didn't touch on or made some connections, please make sure that you leave a comment. I would love to hear it. I would absolutely love to hear it. You can also send me an email, dimensionaldreamswellness@gmail.com. Everything will be in the description box below. I will be posting pick a card readings. I'll be posting monthly zodiac readings, especially tailored for rising, sun, and your north node specifically. And probably at some point I'll start talking about QHHT as well. So a lot of spiritual goodies. I would be so excited to connect with you, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.